Hello and welcome back or to the channel if you're new. It has been a long time since I last posted and a crazy last few months that almost seem hard to believe looking back now. I'm actually currently on a break from my studies due to circumstances out of my control, and I'm going to try and unpack all of it in the next few videos, starting with this one. If I'm being honest, I have been very reluctant to film this video as it is a personal story and I've never really been someone who shares a lot on social media. I do value my privacy, and on top of that, I've also just been a bit concerned or a bit worried that this might come off as an attention grab or a ploy for views, and that's not at all my intention. I think that might be reflected in how long it's taken me to post this video, but I did give it a lot of thought, and after a lot of deliberation, I did feel like I have a responsibility to those of you who have invested in the channel to share the story, and also a responsibility to highlight a medical case that I do think is quite rare and could potentially help other people out there. So with all that said, I'm going to start at the beginning. But in order to prevent a long video where I'm rambling on and on, I thought it might be best to split the story up and start with the diagnosis, which I will address in this video. I will then talk about the lead up to surgery and the post-operative period in the second video. In the third video, I would like to discuss the overall case report, which still remains ambiguous. And then in the last video, I would like to talk a little bit about where I am today, how I'm feeling both physically and mentally, and also how I see my future after this whole experience. So now to start at the beginning, in November 2024, I attended a football game, which was part of a mini league created by the students at our university. The league comprised of 5 teams, all representing specific nationalities or just common regions on the world map. I was playing right wing in our second last fixture of the semester. It was a night game under the lights, and the weather was not ideal, especially not for someone who grew up in South Africa. I was freezing. I tried my best to get on with it though and start running in the hopes that I would warm up and feel my toes again. About 2 minutes into the game, I found myself in a situation where I had to press the opposition centre back, and I did so aggressively. But before I knew it, the ball was on missile lock, heading straight for the region down south. It was due to the centre back trying to clear the ball in panic. Now, considering the premise of this video, you can deduce what happened. Needless to say, not ideal. I immediately knew something was wrong because the impact was clearly very hard, and yet I wasn't in too much pain, at least initially. I don't know if it was due to the cold or the nature of the impact, but under those circumstances, I did assume that less pain must mean an increased severity. Anyways, I subbed myself off and I went onto the bench, and the pain did start to increase a little bit. I started experiencing a burning sensation. But after a small recovery period, I still wanted to play and ended up subbing myself back on. I still tried to play, even with my legs feeling a bit heavy. Eventually, the game finished, and on my walk home, the pain did start to become even more noticeable. I was still a bit in denial though, and I thought at that moment that I would give it a couple of days and I'm sure it would be better. Now, before I continue with the story, at this point I would like to interject and just mention that in hindsight, that probably wasn't the best decision. And if anyone watching this unfortunately ends up in a situation similar to the one that I was in, I would suggest that you do check it out immediately or at least the next day, because there are certain conditions within that region that you don't want to leave. For example, testicular torsion. It is very rare for this to happen as a result of trauma, but it can happen and it is a medical emergency. So I wouldn't leave that for too long. That being said, I am a medical student and I have learnt about that condition. And I know it comes with extreme levels of pain initially and exponentially increases over time. You tend to realize quite quickly that you do have it and you should go get it checked out. Obviously, things aren't always that certain, but I thought that I was okay to ride it out and see how I would feel in 2 days' time. Now back to the story. Come day 4, I'm still in a lot of pain. And I remember waking up, getting ready for my morning class, which was obstetrics and gynecology, thinking that this definitely needs to be checked out. But while I was waiting outside the classroom that morning, I did mention it to one of my friends just to get extra reassurance. And my friend did suggest that I don't leave it any longer and I go get it checked out straight after this class. So that is exactly what I did. As the class finished, I immediately made my way to the emergency unit in the urology clinic. I was seen to by a resident doctor. He gathered all the information on my case and then proceeded to examine via ultrasound. He first checked the left side, which wasn't in any pain, and ended up producing a normal picture on the screen, before checking the right-hand side, which was in a lot of pain and produced a very abnormal picture on the screen, which I will show now. As you can see, it's clearly not normal. There's definitely an area that is completely different to the rest of the tissue, and I will put another picture now just to highlight the difference so that you can see that there clearly was something wrong. After this picture was produced, the doctor then switched the ultrasound into Doppler mode so that he could check for blood flow, and it turned out that there was no blood flow within that region of the testicle. Now that fact, together with the history, being that I was hit or I experienced trauma, led the doctor to believe that the most likely diagnosis is a hematoma, which is a blood mass. And the reason why he came to that conclusion is because malignancy or cancer is usually associated with increased blood flow. However, since the picture on the ultrasound was so abnormal, the doctor thought it would be best to also get a second opinion. And I do think that that was the correct protocol to follow. So he went and called his senior doctor to come and have a look. After his evaluation, he came to the same conclusion, which was comforting. The only thing that did start to worry me a little bit was the senior doctor wanting a second opinion too, or a third opinion, I guess. So he decided to call the andrologist, who had thousands of trauma cases under his belt, to come and also evaluate and hopefully come up with the same conclusion. In the end, after all the collaboration, the most likely diagnosis was still a hematoma. But to be sure, a blood test was ordered to check my tumor marker levels. Once my blood was taken, I was then scheduled for a follow-up appointment in 3 weeks' time, and I left with a prescription for antibiotics and painkillers. Now let's fast forward 6 days later. I am sitting in forensics class trying to pay attention, and I notice that I get a call on my phone from an unknown Hungarian number. I usually never pick these up because it's someone trying to sell me something and I don't even speak the language anyway. So I ignored it and thought nothing of it. Later on in that lesson, maybe about 20 minutes later, the same number tried to call me again. And that did flag a bit of curiosity for me because I feel like people trying to sell me something don't usually call me twice. And that made me think that after the class, I should try call that number. The class finishes and I proceed into the hallway with phone in hand, ready to dial the number back. The person who answers the phone happens to be a doctor, which throws me off. I thought maybe this is a lecturer or professor, but then I very quickly realized that that wasn't the case. The doctor mentions that he saw me 6 days prior for a trauma case, but it looks to be more than that. He then proceeds to tell me that my tumor marker level came back extremely high and I need to come in and see him as early as tomorrow to be briefed about the rest of the process. I was in complete shock, and I think everyone responds differently in that kind of situation. But the way I responded was to bombard the doctor with tons of questions. Being a medical student, I wanted to get a slightly better understanding of what I would be in for tomorrow. But I could tell that the doctor didn't really want to have this conversation over the phone. He definitely wanted to be answering these questions face to face, but he was very patient and answered a few of the questions that I posed to him over the phone. From the phone call, I gathered that my beta HCG level was at 35,000, and it should be less than 2. I also learned that I would need to be booked in for surgery as early as next week Friday. This phone call was currently happening on a Wednesday, which meant that I would be booked in for surgery in just 9 days' time. Once that phone call ends, I immediately call my mom. I'm still frazzled and completely in shock. Quite speechless, to be honest, but I just felt like I needed to speak to her, even though this isn't the conversation that you ever want to have. To be honest, I don't even really remember how that conversation went, but at some point the conversation ended and I made my way home, where I decided at that point I wanted to be alone. But that wasn't the best idea, and luckily my sister wasn't hungry at the time visiting me, So she very quickly came over to my apartment just to be there. We didn't really say much, but we just watched stuff nonstop all the way until my appointment with the doctor the next day. During this time, it was decided that my mom and godmom, who has basically been my second mom my whole life, would fly out to come and support me. The next day arrives, and during my appointment with the doctor, I was told that my tumor marker level was highly suggestive of a type of testicular cancer called choriocarcinoma. It is a very aggressive type of cancer that spreads quickly within the body, so moving with haste is imperative. After being told that, the conversation very quickly moved on to the next steps that would need to be taken, starting with a sperm bank that I would need to visit next week Tuesday. So that would be the week of the surgery, 3 days prior. The reason that this step was important is because I was booked in for a surgery called an orchiectomy, which is a surgical removal of the testicle in question. And after that, there was a good chance that I was going to need chemotherapy or radiotherapy. And all of this could lead to infertility. And that means having a sample in the sperm bank gives me a chance later on down the line of having kids if everything works out. The removed testicle would then be biopsied, and I would also undergo a CT scan so that I could get the staging of the condition. And the reason why it's done in this way is because you can't biopsy a testicle whilst it is still in your body. The only thing that they can do is to remove it first and biopsy after. The whole thing didn't feel real. It was happening so fast. I mean, the nature of the condition required haste, and because of that, it was just laid out to me in a very blunt and informative manner. I was just told that this is what you need to do, this is what you have, and so on and so forth. And I don't even think I could digest it at the time. It was just like, okay, I guess. Maybe that almost helped me in a way because I couldn't really overthink too much. That being said, to make matters worse, my sister was scheduled to leave on the Saturday. So bear in mind, we are now on Thursday. And my mom and godmom could only arrive the next week, Wednesday. So 2 days before the surgery. And that meant that I would be alone for 3 days in between, where overthinking could become more of a problem. There were a few emotional phone calls during that time and a few positive ones, but I was feeling very dejected and just trying not to focus on the issue at all. That was how I decided I would deal with it, at least in the short term. But nothing can prepare you for that kind of news, and I do think everyone processes it differently, which can make the experience quite isolating. Everyone around you is doing their best to help, but you're still in such a state of shock that you don't actually know what you need to hear or do. It's difficult. And on top of that, even though those around you don't truly know what you're going through, they themselves are in a state of shock and also not sure what to say or do. So the whole thing is just compounded. I think only later down the line you realize that you're not completely alone, and unfortunately there are other people out there who have received the same news and can relate to how you're feeling. This is why support groups are so important, because they can help to alleviate that feeling of isolation and give you the best chance to fight. But I wasn't really in that place yet. In those 3 days, I dived into a PlayStation game and tried to escape. I'm going to end the video here. I think it's a good transition point, and I will then continue in the next video as we creep closer to surgery. In the meantime, please feel free to engage in the comments below if you would like to. And to those of you who commented on past videos or send me Instagram messages and have not yet received a reply, I hope you can understand, but I will be addressing those comments in the coming days. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. I really appreciate it.